and I had to explain to him, oh, this is what we did. We fixed that thing after serial number so-and-so, it's been in there, we have that on the vehicle, you can close it out. And I kept saying to myself, this is crazy. Here I am, I'm looking. If I said, no, this thing is still open, are you really going to scrap the whole thing? It was, I can't think of the right word, it was like unreal. Looking out there and knowing they're going, okay, no matter what I say, but we're going through the motions. And General Bolander was a stickler. I had been at meetings with him. We used to routinely, there'd be a review before you could ship a lemon, and it was called a car review. I don't even know what CARR, it was a readiness review. What happened is, if there were open items, NASA would come up with their open items, and they'd meet with their counterpart. Let's say there was 10 open items that they didn't agree to, they would try to resolve them. Let's say there was 1 or 2 left, those 1 or 2 would go in front of a formal board, including General Bolander and the big guys at Drummond, they would decide what to do. I remember once, it's like 10 to 8 at night, we're exhausted, okay? We've been doing this all day, and like I said, the only time the reviewers review things is if the 2 counterparts, NASA and Drummond, couldn't agree. Otherwise, they'd go through hundreds of items. He sits there one day, and one of the things that was boring but very important was configuration management. Because you want to know if this correction happened on this serial number, what was on the vehicle. So there's a whole bunch of things that these 2 guys had to resolve most of them. And General Bolander says, out of nowhere, I don't want to just go through those, I want to go through everyone. And everybody went, he's got to go through every one of these? And that's exactly what he did. Every one. He just didn't care. That's how he was. And I'm sitting with him watching the long shot.
Okay. If there are there any more questions? Because I can.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I don't know, Steve. Thanks for coming. I don't know if this would be just your opinion, or I don't think it's political, but it's very clear that our return to the moon under the Artemis program is going to be delayed because of the landers. We don't have a lander ready. It's like it's nowhere near ready yet. I said this about 5 years ago. Right next door, we have the LEM, which worked perfectly until these new landers and the technology comes online where it can be done. Why the hell didn't you have the LEM right there, build a few more until the technology catches up with us? Most of us now, I think, feel China will be there first before us again, which is going to bother me, but I don't think it bothers a lot of other people. But again, the LEM worked perfectly. You had something that worked perfectly. Why the hell didn't Congress or NASA say, let's just resurrect the LEM, and when these private companies come online, SpaceX with Starship and Blue Origin with Blue Moon, then, of course, forward and better. We had something that worked perfectly 60 years ago. I don't know if you can answer that, but.
Well, I'm going to say something to you, and I don't mean to. It's almost like saying the Vikings had a longboat and it went to North America. It worked. Why don't we use that? Because the technology is so different. I mentioned it. You have fiber optics, and we had cables like this. Every connector was epoxy behind it. It was heavy. Okay? We had things called 26 gauge wire. You know what 26? It's almost, I don't want to say a hair, but if you did anything to it, it broke. So maybe you don't understand, but I can tell you, I don't know about MIT. MIT provided us the primary guidance system. I don't know about that particular stuff. there were no integrated circuits on the LEM. You hear what I'm saying? None. Not a NAND gate, nothing. The construction, PC board, each individual component, from this side to that side. If it was a transistor, this side to two on this side. It was epoxy. It was heavy. I just think of the technology today, and it'd be irresponsible not to take that into account. We had panels. When the astronauts looked at the panel, there were two major panels. To save weight on that panel was radar, EPS, reaction control. This one had propulsion, it had also EPS. So if a light burned out, you took that panel out and you repaired the panel. Guess what? Every subsystem had to be retested because they were worried about the weight. Okay? Instead of having individual, here's the electronics for the attitude and control system. Here's the electronics in this panel for EPS. They were mixed together in an optimum way to save weight. They wanted one panel, not several panels with each individual screws and mountings. So, to me, the LEM was a wonderful thing. It was a wonderful thing, but I think of what people do today. I think I got my phone here. You know, me and Joe were at a place where somebody on NASA asked us, because we were recounting this, what did you do for software quality assurance? Right? And I remember was Jerry Sanders said we had 128 lines of code. Okay? 128 lines of code. And it went crazy, and they just inputted everything. Okay? So that's what happened. I hear what you're saying. I love the idea because I'm a LEM guy, but you have to take advantage of what you have today. It's just longboat, nuclear submarine, something like that.
Yeah, but I don't think he's talking about so much technology, about the way you do it. Because if you look at the way they plan on going to the moon now, it's like 15 launches just to fuel the Starship to take that to the moon. And then I don't think I saw how they plan on ever getting it back.
Wow.
So they're talking 15 launches to send one thing to the moon to land
Well,
on the moon.
let me tell
That's
you,
what he's
the
talking
Apollo program, we had never flew on test articles, okay? LEM 1 was unmanned, okay? Because it was successful, we didn't have LEM 2. LEM 3 was supposed to go with Apollo 8 around the moon. I don't know if you guys remember.
Yeah.
Apollo 8 is when Borman, I think he was, went around the moon by himself. Well, he went and he injected himself into a lunar orbit instead of the slingshot. Every other vehicle had a LEM as a backup. LEM 3 was late. That's why they missed Apollo 8. That's why LEM 3, LEM 4, and ultimately LEM 5 became the first lander instead of LEM 4. Okay? So we did a lot of things. There was a moon race.
You're missing what I'm saying.
Yes, I
The
am.
current way that they plan on taking the Starship to the moon requires 15 launches to fuel it,
To fuel the
send it
Starship,
to the moon.
Starship.
That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the technology, and the thing is big and it's heavy as hell.
Sounds very complex.
I think
can't
that
comment
you
because
should,
I
you
don't
should,
know.
you should
Yeah.
ask this question of Mike Griffin.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's
Well,
exactly what he will be
I
talking
don't
about.
know, I really don't.
All right?
Yeah.
That's what he'll be talking about. But let me say for Steve, in summer, the objectives of the current lunar program are to get to Mars and to use the moon as a stepping stone for Mars. So we're landing at the South Pole on the other side. The LEM could never have done that. And we're trying to set up ISRU to essentially mine fuel so we can develop the technology right architecture to go to the return to the moon or not, that's something that Griffin will specifically talk about. And so I think you should save that question for him the next time.
Well, there's one other thing that,
Yeah, good.
the other thing is, there was a race to get to the moon.
Right.
Okay. I can't emphasize enough that, not so much on engineering, but when we were building and assembling every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, get everybody together, hey, we heard that the Russians did this, the Russians did that. And everybody was jumped up, working overtime. I'm gonna say, unlike any other program that I have ever worked on since, money was, I don't wanna use the word no. If you had a reasonable task that you wanted to do, you did it. If you could justify it, it happened, because they wanted things to happen. So there was a real space race, and I can't emphasize that enough. And we did things quickly. Guys got heart attacks. They'd be working, typically 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, thinking nothing of it, looking forward to a day off. That's how it was. Yes.
Did you find out that these reports of what the Russians did were not true?
I had no idea. I had no idea. We were all, I'm gonna say, I was very naive. If somebody said that, an authority, and they said, hey, we found this, I didn't know. I don't think anybody else really knew, but it was incentive for us to move. Okay. I have no idea about the validity. Yes, sir.
Well, if there are no more questions, I'd like to speak a little bit about the slide that I was going to project here, and I can't do it. And to give you an idea of what was going on, as Steve said, we didn't have the type of analytical tools that we have today on lunar module. But what we did have was tests. And as Steve said, if there was a test that someone wanted to do and they could justify it, all right, it was done. Now, sometimes they would ask you to combine your test with another test if it was possible, but otherwise it was done. So to give you quite an idea of how the confidence in the lunar module was established without the overall analytical work that was done in historical data and things like that, LEM had 29 major test articles, including full-scale structural thermal models. They had 14,247 anomalies or failure during tests, and did a root cause investigation on every single one, and only 22 were left without the root cause being determined. There were 6,889 vibration tests, 3,294 thermal tests, an integrated systems test prior to shipment down to the Cape, and then it was done again at the Cape, as Steve mentioned. Again, there was an end item engineer established, and for cradle to grave analysis, which Steve was on LEM 5, and there was never an economic question about doing a test, and the test was really thought to be required. So testing is something we didn't do on the shuttle as much as they done LEM. We substituted redundancy, extra leg of redundancy, because on the LEM we only had fail-out, fail-safe systems. On the shuttle they added fail-out, fail-out, fail-safe. But it turns out that that wasn't exactly the right way to do it on some systems. And we didn't do as much test at all on the shuttle as we did on the lunar module. And one of the things I want to ask you, Steve, maybe you talked about crabs. Will you explain to them what a crab is?
Crab is when a tech or assemblyman sees something that is not, in his opinion, major, but it's got to be fixed. A very simple one is somebody's routing a wire or group of wires over an unprotected sharp edge, and it needs something plastic on there. That's a typical crab. Somebody sees a scratch random vibration test on the full line. And what they did is they put a plastic tent over the whole vehicle. They had vibrators that would do random vibration, because we found random vibration was great for parts testing, black box testing. It just solved, it picked up many malfunctions that normally would not be picked up. So we put this big tent over the lamp, and it's going through vibration, and the tent is under a nitrogen purge, because they don't want any sparks or something like that to result in a fire. And we had a guy, what's his name, Joe Wittenberg. He was from reliability, because we had a vibration section. He decides he wants to see if he can actually see the vehicle moving. So he puts his head on, he goes out on all fours, puts his head under the tent, and about 3 seconds passes out. Oh. So we did a lot of testing, but we tested everything.
We also had a system called the alert system, where if a problem occurred at another facility, on another related system, we would get a document. It was actually a red-colored document that was called an alert. And one of my jobs, because I was on the follow-on to the LEM, which never happened, and so I had to review all the alerts that had occurred on the LEM to see if they were applicable to this application of the LEM vehicle. And one of them that scared the heck out of me was the fact that the problem on Apollo 13 was pegged very early on, and it was sent to the LEM program, because early in the design of LEM, we also had fuel cells on the lunar module. Eventually, we changed them to batteries, because we felt that the batteries, even though they were heavy, they were a better option from a mass standpoint than fuel cells. So we got that alert. And the alert basically said that we're changing the voltage on the system from 5 volts to 25 volts, and Rockwell never picked it up. And because of that, they got a spark on the system that caused Apollo 13. And if it had happened on Apollo 8, like Steve said, where we didn't have the lunar module as a lifeboat, they would have been dead. And that shows you how important reliability engineering was. I don't want to besmirch the other organizations, but I have to say, to this day, a lot of the reliability groups are not engineering groups. They're analytical people, they're people who know statistics, they're quality assurance people, and they have their place. But until in aerospace, especially space programs, if you don't understand the fundamental design, and not only the fundamental design, but the development of the design, not only what is, but what is not. What did they discard because of what? If you don't understand that, you really don't know reliability, as far as I'm concerned. And I get in a lot of trouble with that. And it was really a wonderful experience to work with Grumman at the time, because the reliability group was an engineering group. Okay? Well, with that, if there are any more questions? Okay, one more back there. Go ahead. Two more.
Could we, in today's economy and world politics, survive doing things the way we did 60 years ago, or are you trying to show us a better way?
I wish I knew the answer. I'm not competent to give you an answer for that. I mean, Kennedy said we're going to the moon. You know, my mother said, go into engineering. I said, why? Next thing I know, there was a thing called Sputnik, and everybody wanted engineers. And I said, oh, this is going to be a good job, you know. I don't know. I don't know the answer. Yes.
You mentioned you go from engineering across the street to manufacturing, where it was built. So engineering, was that Plant 25?
I don't hear well, so.
Oh,
Was engineering at Plant
engineering
25?
done in Plant 25?
We were in Plant 25.
Right.
They did the assembly and test, apparently. most of it, and the 11.5 across the street, plus there were special trailers set up. There was an area called cold flow, where we did not hydraulic, where we did cold testing of reaction control systems, the pressurized tanks. There was a glycol cooling system, that's happening in cold flow. And then we had a major assembly area, which was a clean room.
Yeah.
You had a way you'd go up, and then we had major test equipment like you would see on the TV show. You saw all the astronauts, the
Yeah.
guys, smoking pipes and all of that.
Mm.
Yeah, we had that. Down Cape Kennedy, I don't know if I mentioned this, we put this thing together. The first thing they did at Cape Kennedy is take everything apart. I'm serious. Any kind of unit that can be safely removed, they removed it. They didn't, I don't want to use the word, they didn't trust. It's not the right word. They used to call us FBI, and I thought that was a big, that's good, FBI, right? That meant, excuse me, fucking Bethpage idiots. But when I went down there, I found out. But the FBI kept coming down. But they would take it apart and then basically reassemble and retest. Again, I use the word trust, that's not the right word. It's just building confidence. But they had to do some of it, like we never had real explosive devices until we went down to Cape Kennedy, stuff like that.
When the vibration test you talked about, was that done in Plant 25, in Plant 5?
Plant 5,
Yeah.
Plant 5. 10th, nitrogen purge, pass out. Yes.
Yeah, so my question is, prior to the use of computer-aided design, was design as far as
You have to excuse me, I'm sorry.
Louder, please.
Speak up.
So I was saying, prior to the use and like widespread use of computer-aided design for most parts nowadays, when it comes to making these, lunar modules and spaceships and these different things, what was it like prior to computer-aided design in the United States using price?
I understand it's really easy.
Oh, okay.
The design was done.
Yeah.
It had been firmed up, and we were around it. That's one reason I wanted to do it. I wanted to do design. Not in school, I got design, I don't think that
Yeah.
what it was. So, I gotta get better hearing aids, I guess.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
Just wondering, how did the radiation test, because I figure that, the exposure of the lens to the sun's radiation, so how did you run
There were thermal tests.
There's thermal tests
Yeah,
being
exactly,
tested for
thermal
radiation?
test vehicle. That vehicle was made, it was done down in Houston. They had one, it was called LTAA,
Okay.
pressure